Hi, all. Welcome to my podcast. This is your host, Emily Torres, aka Catholic Converts, and I'm here today to talk about a topic that I found really interesting personally in my life. And if I could tell people one thing they should know to deepen their relationship with God and with others, it would be to know what temperament they are. So, in case you've never heard of the four temperaments before, I'm going to give you a breakdown about that and some history behind it. So way back in around 400 BC, ancient Greek physician Hippocrates proposed that your personality is determined based off of different imbalances in your bodily fluid. So he separated these fluids into four different categories: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. So depending on which fluid you have more of, that's going to determine the type of personality and temperament you have. So those who have more blood, Hippocrates called sanguine, and their personality became known for being super extroverted, sociable, always looking on the bright side, and also being an extreme people pleaser. But they're also super disorganized and scatterbrained often. They're more prone to overcommitting to things without having a good sense of how to have a balanced schedule. Next up, those that have an imbalance of phlegm became known as phlegmatic, and this is the most chill out of all the temperaments. Phlegmatics are known for being super go with the flow. They're known for being super easygoing, for being kind of introverted, and for just following the crowd, not being super ambitious. They're more likely to be homebodies, and they rarely ever get angry. All right, next up, those that have an imbalance of yellow bile are known as choleric. These are the outgoing, driven, passionate leaders. They take initiative, and once they have a goal in mind, they will do anything they can to get there. They will not let anybody or anything stand in their way. But they're also super impatient, and they typically always think that they're right. And then last up, if you have more black bile than anything, you're going to be known as melancholic. And as we might know from the word melancholy, these are people that tend to be sad. But really, they're more of the deep thinkers. They are introverted, they like to be alone, but they also are perfectionists. And so they have these super high standards and ideals. And that's why they can so easily fall into despair or depression, because once those perfect ideals are not met, it's really hard to deal with that. Okay, so obviously Hippocrates' idea about the four bodily fluids corresponding with your personality is not true. Like, it's just not true that the amount of fluid you have in your body makes you a certain way in your psyche or your psychology. However, it is true that personality types and temperaments can be divided in these four ways, and it's so applicable even 2,400 years later. Learning about your temperament is insanely valuable in understanding your strengths, your weaknesses, and everything in between. Okay, now just a brief disclaimer. If you don't know your temperament, I'd highly recommend Googling right now the OSPP 4 temperaments test and taking it. It should take you like 5 minutes or less. It's super easy, and it'll give you the breakdown of how you score in all four of the temperaments. Now, typically people tend to be a combination of two temperaments, not just one. So if you feel like as I'm talking, oh, I relate to both of those things, you probably do. Now, knowing your temperaments can help you so much in understanding the obstacles that can come up in your spiritual life, and also the strengths that you have and how to play on those to set yourself up for the greatest success. So to put this into perspective, let me just go through some common things that the four different temperaments can struggle with spiritually. Sanguines might be prone to not making enough time for prayer because they have committed to a billion other things and activities, and they're very scatterbrained, so they might just forget to do prayer, or they might just not have the time or make the time to do it. Phlegmatics lack motivation often, and so if they don't already have a consistent prayer routine built up, it's going to be really hard for them to try and do that. Or if they already do have a consistent prayer life, they may never improve in that or ever grow deeper in their spirituality because they're just content with where they're at. Cholerics often think they're right, and so they're going to struggle with being obedient to God's will and trusting it when it doesn't make sense to them. Also, if they don't feel like there's anything efficient coming out of prayer, they're just not going to make the time to do it because in their mind, they're going to do what's most efficient. And melancholics, they desire perfection, so they're likely going to struggle the most with falling into sin and coming back from that because it's so easy for them to fall into despair and become depressed when they stumble, when they don't reach their high perfect standards and ideals for themselves. This can also lead to them becoming way overly scrupulous. So knowing about your temperament is going to help you become aware of these things that you can fall into and how to not fall into those things and how to improve if you're just kind of content with where you're at. Now, of course, I'm just speaking broadly. So if you're a sanguine, you might not struggle with exactly what I just said. You might struggle with something else. But in general, that's a tendency that they can all fall into. So knowing your temperament is not just good for your relationship with God, but also with other people. And this is especially true for dating or married relationships. For example, if you're more of a choleric, and if you have a phlegmatic partner, you might easily get frustrated with your partner when there's a problem that arises because in your mind, you're like, I need to find a solution. I need to get to it as quick as possible. And your phlegmatic partner could be so laid back and chill and not have the same initiative and motivation that you have, which can be very frustrating for you. Or if you're more of a sanguine and your partner's melancholic, you are bubbly, you like to be around people, you're super outgoing. And so you might not understand why your melancholic partner likes to have alone time and doesn't like to be out on these social gatherings for hours and hours and hours like you do. Or you might get frustrated that they tend to have a more pessimistic reaction towards things when you have a more optimistic one. Once you understand that not everybody has the same temperament that you do, life becomes so much easier in community with people. It becomes so much easier to be empathetic and considerate towards other people and their decisions in their lives because you might see somebody from the outside perspective and be like, how could that person ever do that? But when you understand, oh, not everybody's like me and that person may be more of a phlegmatic and so they're more laid back, it's easy to be a lot more understanding of their reactions and their decisions once you get that. And that is super helpful in a family unit where your children, your spouse could all have a different temperament from you and you're trying to find a way for all of you guys coming from very different perspectives and reactions can all live in harmony. It's also super helpful in understanding why your parents maybe are the way they are, why they raised you the way that they did, if you do not have the same temperament as them. Maybe your parents were choleric, and so they were super overbearing, super demanding, didn't make enough time to sit and listen to your feelings and just be present with you because they were always on the go and they were always expecting the highest standards for you. Maybe your parents were melancholic, and so they had all of these high ideals and perfectionistic goals that you felt like you could never live up to. Maybe they were phlegmatic, so they were kind of lazy when it came to cooking or cleaning the house. Maybe they were sanguine, so they were always busy, always had a million things on their mind, and you couldn't understand, hey, why didn't you ever just sit and make time for me or just be still? Now, I want to be very careful in making excuses for people on the basis of their temperament because obviously just because you're inclined towards a certain thing or you have a certain personality does not excuse you from behaving a certain way. I want to make that so clear. Just because your parents are choleric doesn't mean that it's okay that they didn't make the time to listen to your feelings and understand you. But all that I'm trying to say is it makes it a little more understandable through that lens. If you're a super chill person, you might look at somebody who's not chill and be like, what's wrong with you? Why do you always act this way? Why can't you just go with the flow? It might be so hard for you to look at that person and understand. But when you realize, oh, they're just different from me. I'm blessed with being easygoing and that person can't be that way. And it just helps it to be a little bit more understandable. As a Catholic, it's also super fun to look back at the lives of the saints and understand what type of temperament they fell into, because it just makes it so comforting to find a saint that's similar to you. That's the beauty of the church, that we have so many different saints of various temperaments, various personalities, various backgrounds and lives and lifestyles. And for every person out there, there's a saint out there that's like them, that they can relate to. And I just think that's so beautiful. So if this is something you guys found interesting, I would recommend checking out the book, The Temperament God Gave You and The Temperament God Gave Your Spouse by Bart and Lorraine Bennett. I've read the latter book and it's been super insanely helpful as someone that's getting married soon and in helping me understand how my temperament and my future husband's temperament go together and what are the weaknesses and what are the strengths that we can play on through these differences. All right, so that's it for today. I'm super curious to hear what you guys think my temperament is, and I also want to hear yours, so feel free to comment below both of those answers, and I want to interact with y'all. If you're looking for ways to support me, you can check out my Patreon, Catholic.converts. You can also check out all of my other social media pages on TikTok, on Instagram, on X. All can be found under the user Catholic Converts. Thanks so much for listening, you guys. Feel free to comment also any topics you want me to cover in the future, and God bless.